Napoleon Bonaparte was only one of the best military captains ever known to the world, but he was also a social and administrative genius who brought about measures that are still in vogue. His military victories saw the French expand their empire across Europe, and Napoleon brought established mighty rulers to heel. Napoleon's military genius was widely acknowledged, and his rule was essentially underpinned by the force of his arms. He also was an exceptional ruler, having uncommon understanding of governance affairs, and the patterns of administration he devised were emulated the world over. His intellectual brilliance was celebrated far and wide, with very few people matching the ingenuity of his mind. He is also known as the workaholic of history, and his energy was exceptional in every respect. It is quite surprising that, given his gifts and achievement, he ultimately failed as the supreme ruler and was banished to the prohibitive island and died in isolation and ignominy. Despite his unprecedented victories, the matter of fact is that by the end of the Napoleonic era, France had been fighting her neighbors and her own people continuously for over 30 years. Hundreds of thousands of young men had been conscripted into the army and were then lost. On the battlefield of Europe, the nation was growing weary, its resources running out, and its people unable to indefinitely sustain even such successful wars. It is now acknowledged that Napoleon suffered from over-ambition. He had a grand vision for himself and his country, and wanted to be a new Alexander the Great or Julius Caesar. Only the most ambitious of endeavors could have the impact his heroes had achieved. It was this that led him to a succession of wars that spanned a continent. It led him to attain much, but also to go too far. He expected a great deal of the people around him, both in their willingness to follow his agenda and their ability to achieve it. These unrealistic expectations saw parts of his schemes for Europe fall apart. Napoleon Marshal Bernadotte, made Crown Prince of Sweden, sided with the Russian against his former leader. Napoleon's older brother, Joseph, who had proved himself as an accomplished king of Naples. He was unable to do the impossible and win around the conquered Spanish. Another brother, Louis, failed to reinforce the continental blockade when King of Holland, and looked after Dutch interests instead. Their younger brother, Jerome, made errors as a general, both in his approach to the invasion of Russia and his leadership of troops at Waterloo. American and British ships clashed during the War of 1812, with Napoleon's blockade being a factor which contributed to the start of that war. The system was full of holes. Occupied territories became resentful of the imposition, stirring opposition to the French. The most potent difficulty that brought about Napoleon's fall was his inherent inability to compromise. Towards the end, Napoleon refused any chance to salvage his achievements rather than sue of peace. He continued fighting the coalition even as they crossed the French borders. His followers had to remove him from power rather than face destruction. His return in the 100 Days' War followed a similar pattern. The swift collapse of the Bourbon regime and the Napoleon's popularity were powerful bargaining chips. Europe was tired of war. If he had been willing to negotiate, he might have secured his return, or at least left the throne to his son. Napoleon always had to win on his terms. Ultimately, that led him to lose. If you loved the video, then like, share and subscribe to our YouTube channel.